If you find your practice thrilling, you are not yet practicing correctly. I know this offends the ear that has been taught to chase passion, to follow the heart's fire. But I speak from 5 decades of labor, the work of my hands and mind that has filled thousands of pages and countless hours in workshops, in anatomical theaters, beside rivers and under the open sky. The practice that transforms you is precisely the practice that bores you. Why? Because excitement is the mind seeking novelty, and novelty is the enemy of depth. When you draw the same sphere 100 times, the first 10 drawings might excite you, the next 20 frustrate you. By the 40th, your mind wanders. You think of other things. You wonder if you are wasting your time, but somewhere between the 70th and the 90th drawing, something shifts. You stop looking at the sphere and begin seeing it. You perceive the way light bends around form, the gradient of shadow, the geometry of curvature that was always there but invisible to your earlier eye. Mastery hides in that tedium. The boring work is where transformation lives. And if you cannot bear boredom, you will never bear greatness. I understand why you resist this truth. You have been taught that mastery comes from inspiration, from divine sparks that strike the fortunate few. You see the finished painting on the wall and think it emerged complete from the artist's hand. You hear the beautiful music and assume the musician was born with that gift flowing through their fingers. But I tell you, you see only the final result. You do not see the 10,000 hours that came before it. You do not see the repetition so tedious that most would have abandoned it after a week. Let me tell you what you will gain from walking this path with me. By the time we finish this conversation, you will understand why the practice that feels dull is actually the practice that transforms. You will learn specific methods to turn repetition into revelation. I will show you how to bear the boredom without losing your purpose or your mind, and I will give you exercises, simple and direct, that you can begin today, not tomorrow, today. I know your struggles. You feel discouraged because mastery seems distant and your daily practice feels ineffective. You look at others who appear to advance quickly while you toil over fundamentals that seem beneath them. Your practice has become mechanical. You have lost the sense of purpose. You are tempted by quick methods, by trends, by shortcuts that promise mastery without the tedium. And you fear that the hours you spend on repetitive fundamentals are time stolen from real creative work. I have felt all of these frustrations. I have compared myself to faster painters and wondered why I labored so slowly. I have questioned whether my obsessive attention to small details was a gift or a curse. I have been mocked for wasting time on studies that seemed to others pointless. But I discovered something that changed everything. The boring work is not a barrier to mastery. It is mastery itself, practiced one unremarkable day at a time. Here is the truth most will not tell you. Mastery does not require talent. It does not require divine inspiration. It requires only two things: accurate observation and patient repetition. That is all. But these two things demand a quality most lack: the willingness to be bored. I speak not as one who succeeded easily, but as one who failed often and learned slowly. For more than 50 years, I have filled thousands of pages with observations that seem to others pointless. I have studied under masters, collaborated with scholars, dissected corpses in cold stone rooms beneath hospitals. I have measured buildings, pursued truth through disciplines both celebrated and forgotten. My method is not theory. It is the accumulated wisdom of decades spent in the workshop, the anatomical theater, and the wild places where nature reveals her laws. Compare where you are now to where you could be. Right now, practice feels like punishment. Progress feels invisible. You question whether you have what it takes, but imagine this instead. Practice becomes meditation. Each repetition reveals something new. Small improvements compound into visible mastery. You trust the process because you understand its hidden architecture. This is not fantasy. This is the natural result of proper practice. But first, we must destroy some lies. The first lie is that mastery requires talent or divine inspiration. No. Mastery requires observation and repetition, nothing more. The second lie is that boring practice is wasted time while exciting practice is productive. The reverse is true. Boring practice builds the foundation. Exciting practice builds only ornament. The third lie is that masters work quickly and confidently. No, masters work slowly precisely because they see more. They see more problems, more possibilities, more precision required. Why is my approach different from what you have heard before? Because I do not separate art from science, hand from mind, beauty from truth. I teach you to see practice not as a means to an end, but as the place where understanding is forged. I show you how repetition opens the door to perception, how doing the same thing 100 times is not redundancy but deepening vision. I have felt your frustration when the work resists your will. I have known your doubt when progress seems invisible. I have endured your boredom when the task feels mechanical. And I have experienced a quiet joy when, after months of repetition, the veil lifts and you suddenly see what was always there. This is the path I walk with you today. Now let me tell you some stories. Not to entertain you, but to show you the truth of what I am teaching. There was a winter night many years ago when I entered the anatomy theater for the first time. It was beneath a hospital in Florence. The room was stone and cold. A single candle burned. On the table lay the body of a man, uncovered, waiting for my knife. I was young then. I thought I understood the human form. I had drawn it many times. But drawing the surface is not the same as understanding the interior. The smell struck me first. Death has a scent that clings to your clothes and hair. I steadied my hand and made the first cut. The flesh parted. I saw what I had only imagined before. The layers, the mystery beneath skin. My stomach turned. I wanted to leave, but I continued, because my teacher had said, if you wish to paint the human form truthfully, you must know what lies beneath. That first night, I learned almost nothing. My horror prevented seeing. But I returned. The second body. The third. Each time, I brought my drawings. Each time, I recorded one small truth, the path of a nerve, the attachment of a tendon, the way muscle bundles beneath skin, the architecture of bone. By the 10th body, the horror had faded. By the 20th, I was no longer cutting flesh. I was reading the language of form. I returned 30 times to that cold room. Most of those nights were boring, not horrifying, not exciting, just tedious work. Cutting, observing, drawing, cutting, observing, drawing. The same process repeated in slight variations. My hands ached. My eyes blurred. I wondered sometimes if anyone else would ever care about these details I was recording. But then something happened. After 30 bodies, I no longer saw flesh. I saw structure. I saw the logic of how forces move through bone and tendon. I understood why the shoulder curves the way it does, why the neck attaches at that precise angle, why the hand can move in ways the foot cannot. This knowledge did not come in a flash of inspiration. It came through the boring accumulation of small observations, repeated until they became understanding. This is what boring practice does. It converts revulsion into revelation. It transforms confusion into comprehension, but only if you persist through the tedium. Let me tell you about the horse. When Duke Ludovico commissioned me to create a monument, a bronze horse and rider larger than any attempted before, I thought myself ready. I had drawn horses. I knew their form. But the Duke wanted something unprecedented. A rearing horse, balanced on its hind legs, 20 feet tall, cast in bronze. I began by measuring horses, real horses, living horses. I went to the stables. I watched them walk, trot, gallop. I measured the length of leg against the height of shoulder. I studied how their weight shifted. I examined the muscles that bunched and released with each movement. I built small models. I calculated weight distributions. I experimented with casting techniques. This work consumed 16 years of my life. 16 years. People mocked me. They said Leonardo begins by thinking of the end before the beginning. They said I wasted time. They whispered that I would never finish, that I was lost in obsessive details that did not matter. Some days I wondered if they were right. The work was boring, measuring the same proportions again and again, calculating weights, testing materials, building models only to destroy them and start over. There was no applause for this work. No one praised the thousands of small studies. They only complained that the statue remained unfinished. Then the French came. Charles VIII invaded Milan. Soldiers used my clay model for target practice. The bronze I had gathered for casting was melted down for cannons instead. The horse was destroyed before I could cast it. 16 years, seemingly lost. But here is what those who mocked me did not understand. Those 16 years were not wasted. That boring practice taught me principles of proportion, balance, and structure that informed every work I made thereafter. I learned how to see weight and tension. I understood the geometry of movement. I discovered laws of engineering that I applied to bridges, buildings, machines. The horse was destroyed, yes, but the practice succeeded. This is what boring work does. Even when the project fails, the understanding remains. The tedious hours of measurement and calculation built something in my mind that could never be taken from me. A cathedral of knowledge erected one small stone at a time. Most people judge practice by its immediate product. Did you finish? Did you succeed? But I learned to judge practice by what it builds inside you. The transformation of perception, the deepening of understanding. Now let me tell you about painting an angel. When I was young, my master Verrocchio was completing a large painting of the baptism of Christ. It was an important commission. Verrocchio was the finest master in Florence. He allowed me, his young apprentice, to paint a single angel in his composition, one angel in the corner. My first significant contribution I could have painted it in a day. I had painted angels before. I knew the form. But I did not begin immediately. Instead, I spent weeks on studies that no one would ever see. I painted drapery over and over, studying how fabric folds, how light catches in the creases, how shadow pools beneath cloth. I drew faces expressing divine contemplation. I studied how light makes something appear luminous rather than merely bright. These studies were boring. The same folds, the same expressions, slight variations, repeated endlessly. My fellow apprentices thought I delayed out of fear or laziness. Why not simply paint the angel and be done? But when I finally approached Verrocchio's panel and painted that single angel, something extraordinary happened. Verrocchio looked at what I had made. He set down his brush, and he never painted again. Not because I was more talented than my master, but because I had practiced what he had not. The boring accumulation of observation. What appeared to others as sudden genius was simply the visible result of invisible repetition. The angel took me only a few hours to paint, but those hours rested on weeks of boring practice that no one witnessed. That is the secret. What looks like natural gift is actually disciplined. Let me tell you about learning to see water. A nobleman once asked me why I spent afternoons watching streams instead of accepting commissions. He implied I was lazy, that I preferred idle observation to honest work. I did not try to defend myself. How could I explain to someone who had never truly looked that seeing requires time? I had a question that troubled me. Why does water spiral when it flows? Why does it form these specific patterns when it falls? I needed to understand, so I watched, and I drew. Water falling, water flowing, water spiraling, water pooling. Hundreds of drawings. Most of them were crude, repetitive, unremarkable. The same shapes attempted again and again. This practice was boring. Sitting beside a stream for hours, drawing the same flow from slightly different angles. No one paid me for these drawings. No patron waited for them. They served no immediate purpose. But slowly, I began to see what I had only looked at before. The hidden mathematics of fluid motion. The principles that govern how water moves through space. That knowledge entered everything I made thereafter. My paintings of rivers, my designs for canal systems, my understanding of how forces move through any medium, not just water. The boring observation of one phenomenon became insight into natural law itself. Most people want understanding to arrive quickly. They want the insight without the hours of looking. But nature does not reveal herself to the hasty mind. She speaks only to those who watch and watch again and watch 1,000 times more. Now, one more story before we move deeper. I learned something from an old painter when I was still young, and my work appeared false, but I did not know why. He told me, "Look at your painting backwards." I did not understand. He brought a mirror, placed it beside my easel, and showed me my painting in reverse. Suddenly I saw errors that had been invisible moments before. Proportions that seemed correct forward revealed their flaws backward. From that day, I kept a mirror beside my easel. After each session of work, I checked my painting in the mirror. Forward, backward, forward, backward. Hundreds of times over the years. It was tedious. It broke my rhythm. It felt mechanical. Sometimes I resented this interruption, but that boring practice trained my eye to see beyond my assumptions. Our eyes become accustomed to our own errors. We see what we expect rather than what is actually there. The mirror breaks that familiarity. It forces true seeing. This simple, repetitive, boring exercise saved me from more mistakes than any dramatic technique. You see the pattern in these stories? The anatomy theater, the bronze horse, the angel studies, watching water, the mirror check. None of these were exciting in the moment. None brought immediate reward. All were repetitive, tedious, boring, but each transformed my perception. Each built understanding that could not have come any other way. Now let me take you deeper into why this is true. Why does mastery require boredom? Let me explain. The mind has two modes. The first mode is seeking. This is the mind that craves novelty, excitement, variety. It skims across the surface of things, tasting many flavors but digesting none. The second mode is deepening. This is a mind that focuses, repeats, penetrates. It goes beneath the surface into the architecture of understanding. Seeking mode is easy. It feels good, but it is shallow. Deepening mode is difficult. It feels boring, but it is where mastery lives. And here is the crucial point. Boredom is not the enemy of depth. Boredom is the gatekeeper. When you encounter boredom in your practice, you have reached the threshold. Most people turn back at this threshold. They return to seeking mode, to novelty, to excitement. But if you pass through boredom, you enter depth. Think of it like digging a well. The first few feet are easy. You see progress. You might even find interesting rocks or fossils. But then you hit hard clay. The work becomes tedious. Each shovelful looks like the last. You wonder if there is any water down there at all. Most people quit here, but if you continue through the tedium, you break through to the aquifer. Clear, pure water that was there all along, waiting beneath the boring clay. Boring practice is the clay you must dig through to reach the water of understanding. Let me tell you about the law of accumulation. One observation is merely a fact. 10 observations begin to form a pattern. 100 observations become a principle. 1,000 observations become mastery. But you cannot skip from 1 to 1,000. You must pass through every number in between. This is the boring work, the accumulation itself. Each repetition adds one invisible brick to the cathedral. You cannot see the cathedral when you are laying the 10th brick or the 100th. You see only the boring, repetitive work of placing one brick after another. But after 10,000 bricks, the cathedral stands, and everyone who sees it marvels at the sudden appearance of beauty. They do not see the 10,000 boring moments that created it. This is the paradox of repetition. The first time you do something, you see only what you expect to see. Your assumptions fill in the gaps. By the 20th time, expectation begins to fade. You start to notice small things you missed before. By the 50th time, you see what is actually there rather than what you thought was there. By the 100th time, you see what was always hidden beneath the obvious surface. Boring practice removes the veil of assumption. It scrapes away your preconceptions until only truth remains. But how do you walk through the gate of boredom without despair? The first kind is imitative practice. This is copying the work of others to understand their methods. It is useful for beginners. When you copy a master's drawing, you learn their technique. You see how they solve problems. But this practice is limited. It teaches you style without substance. You become, as I have written, the grandchild of nature rather than the child. You learn from someone who learned from nature, but you do not learn from nature herself. The second kind is exploratory practice. This is experimenting with new subjects, methods, materials. It is exciting. You discover things. You feel creative, but it is unreliable because excitement clouds judgment. When the work succeeds beyond your judgment, when you create something good but do not understand why it is good, you acquire nothing. You cannot repeat the success because you did not understand its cause. Exploratory practice gives you happy accidents but not mastery. The third kind is foundational practice. This is returning to fundamentals repeatedly, not copying others, not chasing novelty, but observing nature herself, drawing the same form until you understand it completely. This is boring, but this is where transformation happens. This is where nature becomes your teacher. The proper sequence is this. Begin with imitation. Learn the language of your craft from those who came before. Move to exploration. Test the boundaries. Discover what is possible, but return always to foundation. Deepen the roots. Most people abandon foundation too early. They taste imitation, enjoy exploration, and think they have graduated beyond basics. Then they wonder why their branches bear no fruit. If you are a painter, draw spheres, cylinders, light and shadow 500 times before attempting a complex subject. If you are a writer, copy sentences from the masters by hand until rhythm enters your bones. If you learn any craft, identify the fundamental unit, the atom of your art, and repeat it. This is boring, I know. But here is what you must understand. The boredom is not meaningless suffering. The boredom is the signal that you are approaching the threshold where ordinary seeing becomes true perception. Let me now teach you the difference between looking and seeing. Most practice fails because people look without seeing. Looking is what the eye does. Seeing is what the mind does after the eye has looked 100 times. They are not the same. When you first look at a tree, you see the category. Tree, oak, maple, a name. The second time, you begin to describe an oak with spreading branches, this specific tree rather than trees in general. The third time, if you pay attention, you begin to measure. You notice that branches divide at this angle, that the trunk is this proportion relative to the canopy, that the bark has this particular texture. The fourth time, if you have truly practiced seeing, you perceive the hidden laws, how weight distributes, how growth follows structure, how every part serves the whole. Most people never pass the first stage. They look at a tree and see the word tree. Then they move on, thinking they have seen it, but they have only named it. This is why practice feels boring, because you remain in the early stages where nothing new appears. The breakthrough happens in the later stages, which only reveal themselves after repetition. The boredom is the tunnel. Perception is the light at the end. but you must walk through the dark tunnel to reach the light. Let me give you a specific exercise I used. After observing a subject, I would remove it from view, then I would draw it entirely from memory, then I would compare my drawing to the original every time. I was humbled. I discovered what I had forgotten, what I had invented because I did not truly see it. Where my assumptions replaced observation, then I would observe again, focusing specifically on what I missed, and draw from memory again, and compare again. I would repeat this cycle until my memory drawing matched the original. This practice is tedious, but it reveals the gap between looking and seeing. Memory is merciless. It shows you exactly what you did not truly observe. Each cycle strengthens internal vision. Eventually, you can hold the subject in your mind with such clarity that drawing becomes not recording from life, but recording from understood truth. This is how the mind becomes like a mirror, reflecting nature truly. But you cannot skip the boring repetition. The mirror is polished through use. Now I must teach you something difficult but essential. How do you know when your work is good? How do you correct errors you cannot see? There are 3 stages of development. In the first stage, your work exceeds your judgment. You create things that surprise you. You cannot fully explain why they succeed. You feel proud, but you are blind. This is the most dangerous stage because you learn nothing. You stumble into success without understanding it. In the second stage, your work equals your judgment. You create what you intend. You feel competent, but this is stagnation disguised as mastery. You have reached the limit of your current perception. Only the third stage produces growth. In this stage, your judgment exceeds your work. You see errors in your creations that others cannot see. Your dissatisfaction is precise. You know exactly what is wrong and why. This stage feels terrible. You see your inadequacy clearly. But this is the only stage where improvement happens. The young artist who possesses this rare disposition, whose judgment exceeds his work, will arrive at great perfection. He will produce few works, but they will fix the admiration of every beholder. How do you develop this judgment? Through boring practice that trains your eye. You must actively seek your flaws. Do not defend your work. Interrogate it. Use a mirror to see it reversed. Step away for days, then return with fresh eyes. Welcome criticism, especially from those who do not flatter you. They are less likely to deceive you than friends who wish to please you. Ask yourself constantly, what would nature do here? Where have I departed from truth? This requires humility. You must admit that nature is wiser than you, that your memory is imperfect, that you cannot trust your mind alone. You must consult external reality again and again. This is boring. This constant checking, measuring, comparing, correcting. It would be so much easier to trust yourself, to assume your work is good, to defend your choices. But whoever flatters himself that he can retain in his memory all the effects of nature is deceived. The boring practice of verification is what separates true mastery from clever imitation. Now let me teach you how to structure your days. How do you actually practice in a way that builds mastery? The principle is this: better to practice 1 hour daily for a year than to practice 12 hours once. Mastery is not built in intensity, it is built in consistency. Small, repeated effort over a long time. The study of what is excellent is food both for mind and body. But like food, it must be taken regularly, not in a single feast that makes you sick. Each practice session should have 3 parts. First, preparation. Before you begin the boring work, settle your mind. Do not approach practice while agitated or rushed. Observe something in nature first. A cloud, a leaf, a stone. Let this observation quiet the seeking mind and activate the perceiving mind. This takes only a few minutes, but changes everything. Second, repetition. This is the boring work itself. Choose one fundamental element to practice today. Not 10 things. One thing. Repeat it with full attention. When boredom arises, and it will arise, do not flee. This is the threshold I told you about. Continue through the boredom until perception shifts, until you stop looking and begin seeing. Third, reflection. After the boring work, do not simply move on to other tasks. Sit with what you learned. What did you see today that you did not see yesterday? Where did your work diverge from nature? What small truth did the repetition reveal? Write this down. Memory deceives. The notebook preserves. I have filled thousands of pages with observations. Most seem trivial at the time. The shadow beneath the chin is not black but blue-gray. The third branch divides at a sharper angle than the second. Water falling sounds different on stone than on earth. But over years, patterns emerged. Boring observations accumulated into philosophical principles. The notebook is sacred. It is where the boring work transforms into permanent understanding. If you do not record, you must learn the same lesson again and again. But if you record, each observation builds on the last. Balance variety with focus. Do not practice everything at once. Practice one thing until it yields its secret. Then practice the next thing. Depth before breadth. He who attempts too much accomplishes nothing. I've seen many artists who know a little about everything but understand nothing deeply. They are like shallow ponds that dry up in summer. Better to be a deep well that never runs dry. Now I will give you specific practices, not theories, not philosophies, actual exercises you can begin today. The first practice I call the one-object discipline. Choose one simple object, a sphere, a cube, an egg, a stone. Draw it every day for 30 days. Same object, same position, same lighting, no variation at all. I know what you are thinking. This sounds incredibly boring. It is, but here is what happens. Days 1 through 7, you draw what you think the object looks like. Your assumptions dominate. Days 8 through 15, you become frustrated. It feels repetitive and pointless. You want to quit. Days 16 through 23, you pass through boredom and begin to see the object. Really see it. Days 24 through 30, you perceive things invisible before. Subtle gradations of shadow. The precise curve of edges. The way light reveals form. Set aside 20 minutes daily. Same time every day. Use pencil or charcoal on paper. Do not judge the drawings. Simply observe and record. At the end of 30 days, Lay all drawings side by side. Observe your evolution. You will see the transformation from looking to seeing. This is not about drawing. This is about training, perception through repetition. The object does not change. Your seeing does. This principle applies to everything. One form practiced 1,000 times. One sentence structure repeated until it becomes natural. One skill refined through patient attention. The second practice is the memory test. Observe a subject for 5 minutes. A face, a hand, a tree. Study it carefully. Then remove the subject from view. Now draw it entirely from memory. No peeking. After you finish, return to the subject. Compare your memory drawing to reality. Note every discrepancy. What did you forget? What did you invent? Where did assumption replace observation? Now observe again for 5 minutes. Focus on what you missed. Draw from memory again. Compare again. Repeat this cycle until your memory drawing matches reality. This practice reveals the gap between looking and seeing. It is humbling. Every time you discover how little you truly saw. But this humiliation is the beginning of wisdom. Musicians can do this with a passage of music. Play it while looking at the score. Then play it from memory. Notice where you falter. Writers can read a paragraph, then rewrite it from memory and compare structure. Any skill can use this method. Practice. Reproduce without reference. Compare. Repeat. The third practice is the judgment mirror. After completing a work, place it in front of a mirror. Observe the reversed image. What appears correct forward often reveals flaws backward. Because our eyes become accustomed to our own errors, we see what we expect rather than what is there. The mirror breaks that familiarity. Asymmetries become visible. Proportions reveal their imperfections. The boring practice of checking the mirror interrupts your assumptions and forces fresh seeing. You can also leave the work for 3 days, then return to it, or photograph it and view it small on a screen, or turn it upside down. Any method that breaks habitual seeing. The fourth practice is the notebook of small truths. Carry a notebook always. Record one observation per day. Something small you saw today that you had only looked at before. Do not record insights or philosophies. Record only direct observations. The shadow beneath the chin is not black but blue-gray. The third branch divides at a sharper angle than the second. Water falling sounds different on stone than on earth. This trains you to observe continuously, not just during formal practice. Over time, these small observations accumulate into a cathedral of understanding. When you look back through old notebooks, you see how perception deepens. You see patterns you did not notice while recording. This is not exciting work. It is boring. Daily notation. But this is how I learned everything. Do this for 1 year without stopping. At year's end, read all observations from the beginning. You will see how boring accumulation becomes profound wisdom. The fifth practice is the foundational return. No matter your current level, return to fundamentals weekly. If you are an advanced painter, draw simple spheres. If you are an experienced writer, copy sentences by hand. If you are a skilled musician, practice scales slowly. Do not skip this because it feels beneath you. Fundamentals are not graduated from, they are deepened into. Each return to basics reveals new subtleties your advanced practice missed. The sphere you draw today with 10 years of experience is not the same sphere you drew as a beginner. You see more, perceive more, understand more. Schedule one practice session per week titled Return to Basics. Treat it with the same seriousness as advanced work. Notice what you see now that you could not see before. This is how mastery remains rooted in truth rather than floating in cleverness. These 5 practices are simple. Too simple, perhaps. You might want something more exotic, more exciting, but I give you what works, not what entertains. These boring exercises have built every skill I possess. They will build yours if you practice them faithfully. Now we approach the end of our conversation, but before we part, let me gather the harvest for you. You have walked with me through the long garden of practice where mastery grows slowly, hidden beneath repetition that the hasty mind calls boring. The secret is this: mastery is not a gift bestowed upon the fortunate. It is not sudden inspiration or divine talent. It is the patient accumulation of small truths discovered through work so tedious that most abandon it before the revelation comes. You have learned that boring practice is the gate through which perception enters. That repetition removes the veil of assumption and reveals what is truly there. That judgment must exceed work for growth to happen. That nature is the only reliable teacher, and boring observation is how she speaks. The practices I have given you are not glamorous. The one-object discipline, the memory test, the judgment mirror, the notebook of small truths, the foundational return, these will not impress your peers tomorrow. But practiced faithfully, they will transform you from one who sees only surfaces to one who perceives the hidden architecture of all things. When boredom rises in your practice, smile. For boredom is not the signal to quit. It is the signal that you are approaching the threshold where ordinary seeing becomes true perception. The mind resists depth. It prefers novelty. But you are no longer a servant of the restless mind. You are a student of nature, and nature reveals herself only to those who look, and look again, and look 1,000 times more, until looking becomes seeing. The boring work is sacred work. Do not despair when progress feels invisible. The roots of the great oak grow in darkness, unseen, for years before the first leaf emerges. Your boring practice is the root. Trust it. If this teaching has resonated with the quiet part of you that knows that truth is found not in excitement but in patient attention, then I ask 3 small things. First, subscribe to this channel so we may continue these conversations. There is much more to explore: how to train the eye, how to understand proportion, how to translate observation into creation. I have filled thousands of pages with observations, and I wish to share them with those who will listen. Second, if this message stirred something in you, press the symbol of approval beneath. It tells me that this path, though unfashionable, still calls to those who seek mastery rather than mere accomplishment. Third, share in the comments below. What is the boring practice in your craft that you have been avoiding? What fundamental exercise have you judged as beneath you? Write it publicly. Commit to it. Let this community witness your dedication to the unglamorous work that builds greatness. I leave you with this thought. The master is not the one who knows more techniques. The master is the one who has looked longer, deeper, and more patiently at what everyone else only glanced at. The boring practice is not a barrier to mastery. It is mastery itself, practiced one unremarkable day at a time. Go now, and look again, and when you think you have seen enough, Look once more. That is the path. That is the way. That is the secret hidden in plain sight beneath the surface of what the world calls boring. I will meet you here again with more observations from the long practice of learning to see. Until then, remain curious, remain patient, remain faithful to the truth that nature alone teaches.